Hello. Okay, for those of you returning to the channel, welcome back, and for those of you that are new here, that have just stumbled upon this video, then thank you for joining me. And if you find yourself wanting to stick around to follow just some random Welsh geek ramble on about film and TV, then please hit that subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. And yeah, welcome to my spoiler-free review of Supernatural Horror Obsession, written, directed and edited by a Carey Barker. I've not seen his directorial debut, Milk and Cereal, but I've heard good things about it, and I have been looking forward to this movie, just from the glimpses that we have been getting from within the trailers. It looks completely insane, it looks bonkers, and so yeah, I'm really excited for this. So the story follows Bear, a shy music store employee who has secretly been in love with his childhood friend and co-worker Nikki for years. Desperate to make her love him back, he uses a mysterious supernatural object called the One Wish Willow to wish for her affection. At first, the wish seems to work perfectly, but Nikki's feelings quickly become disturbingly intense and obsessive. So, what Carey Barker does here is take that kind of very familiar, popular, be careful what you wish for trope, and uses that trope to give us what I felt was an incredibly intense, disturbing, brutal and tragic experience. This movie, this experience was incredible. I'm just going to say it right off the bat here. For me personally, Obsession is one of the, if not the best horror movies of 2026 so far. I had so much fun with this movie. It was incredibly intense. There are moments that really sort of made me wince and just, you know, it actually made me physically have to turn away from the screen because of what was unfolding within the frame. And just, it was one of those experiences that really pulls you sort of emotionally in all sort of different directions with how you feel towards its characters and just sort of how the story unfolds with these characters. And it just does an incredible job at sort of evoking sort of an array of emotions, you could say, in regards to how you feel towards its characters. Take the character of Bear, for example, that is brought to life beautifully by Michael Johnston here. He does a wonderful job at bringing this character to life. I just found his performance to be incredibly mesmerising. It's incredibly compelling. And it's a performance that allows you to buy in to what this character is experiencing and going through. You know, at the end of the day, this story does have quite a fantastical sort of supernatural element to it. And it's the performances that kind of really sell that kind of aspect of its story and sort of allows you not to be sort of taken out of the experience. It, in many ways, the performances really do ground this experience and sort of really fuels that kind of the darker nature and sort of the intensity of what it is they're exploring you thematically within this experience. And the character of Bear really sort of puts you on a journey here. In the movie really does toy with you emotionally. And, you know, the character of Bear at the beginning of the movie is portrayed as being this kind of very vulnerable, shy, lonely character where, you know, you immediately end up sort of emotionally feeling for the character. Like I found myself really gravitating towards the character emotionally. Like, I felt empathy for the character. It's a character that is very relatable, and a lot of that is down to the very smart, tight writing, as well as that beautiful performance by Michael Johnston. But then as the story unfolds, as the story evolves, the film really does toy with you and just sort of how you feel towards that character, and what they explore you thematically was incredibly dark. It has a lot of layers to it. And I found it so incredibly satisfying because it's an experience that is designed to sort of evoke those emotions from you, to feel disturbed, to feel uneasy. And I think Carrie Barker does a fucking superb job at evoking those emotions. This movie was incredible. Like, I loved it. And it, like I said, it takes a very familiar and popular trope, a pop culture trope, like Be Careful What You Wish For, and does something incredibly new and refreshing. Yes, it's familiar, but it just felt really refreshing. It felt incredibly different. And it's a good example, of having something very familiar at its core when it comes to what they're trying to do with its story, or what they're using really to tell a story, and give us something that can still feel incredibly different and new. Ind Navarrete, I think that's how you pronounce the name. Apologies if it's incorrect. She plays Nikki, Bear's co-worker and childhood friend, the one that he has this crush on, the one that he secretly loves. And she is also superb here. It's these two main performances that kind of really drive this experience and really sell the experience. Like, there's all these other elements to it, these other aspects from a technical perspective, like the way in which the film is shot, for example, with its 1.50 to 1 aspect ratio, which gives it that kind of very intimate and sort of uncomfortable feeling, which really does work for what Carrie Barker is attempting to bring to life here, and just how he sort of composes his scenes, where it's kind of very central in how he sort of places the main characters within the frame and all of that. It is wonderfully crafted here to the point where it just sucks you in, it immerses you into this story in a way that makes you feel incredibly uncomfortable. And it gets under the skin. It's, you feel uneasy. And it's all because of how this movie is crafted, how the movie is brought to life from a visual perspective, from how the camera is used, and that kind of incredibly smart and tight writing. But it's the performances then that kind of really sort of fuel and drive this experience forward. And they are performances that I found to be incredibly compelling, very mesmerising, and Ind Navarrete here as Nikki, along with Michael Johnston, are just superb. They are incredible. The way she goes just from 0 to 100 in certain moments, it puts you on edge. Like, you believe that this character was going sort of on this journey, on this sort of kind of really nightmarish experience. And it's a performance that really sells the horror. Like, she does a wonderful job at just going from crazy to scary, and how she would bring this character to life sort of with these expressions, and how she would sort of handle herself. It was an incredible performance. And you'd also have these moments where she would sort of move in this kind of very sort of unnatural kind of way. And they are moments that I found incredibly effective and creepy. And a lot of that was not only because of how she was bringing the character to life, but how those moments were sort of constructed from a technical perspective, like with the editing. Carrie Barker also edited this movie here, and the editing is another aspect that kind of really sells the horror and just ends up kind of really sort of immersing you and sucking you into this horrifying thrill ride. There was just something with how she would move in certain moments that kind of reminded me a little bit of French or German body horror movies from a certain era. And whether that was intentional or not, I don't know. But I kind of really liked that approach, because again, you are kind of getting sort of, it is in many ways, you could look at it as being a possession movie as such. But I think the way in which they do it here, the way in which they bring that aspect of the story to life was incredibly effective. It was very clever, and it just felt different. But again, a lot of that was, a mix of different elements as to why it was so effective, whether it be the performance or the lighting, the way the camera is used, the editing. And I just feel the way in which this movie was constructed, it was just meticulous, because every moment, every bit of dialogue, sort of every frame, and just in how we sort of focus in on sort of our characters' faces, it all has a meaning, it all has a purpose that just allows this experience to be as effective as it is, and just again adds to that immersion and sucks you into it emotionally. Like, I really felt for these characters, but I went on a ride with them. I felt, this was one of those experiences where you feel like you're there with these characters and you're kind of put on this almost an emotional roller coaster. And I would just love how the camera would just focus. You'd get a shot, you'd get a frame where you have our character and it's just their face. And it would linger. It would just linger and on our character. And through the beautiful performances, the tragic performances, there is so much just being said. And I'm trying to be very vague here because this is spoiler free, but I just love how the camera was used, how the camera would be positioned, and how it lingers on certain moments that kind of really allowed certain moments to have time to breathe and for us to be sort of incredibly immersed into what was happening within that moment emotionally. Like, it felt raw. And remember, you have got quite a supernatural, fantastical element within this story, but it always remained grounded to the point where the horror was really working, or the horror always worked. It never sort of took you out. Though, saying that, I'm not going to go into details because this is spoiler free, but there is one moment within the last 30 minutes that felt like it could have been a reshoot. And it is a moment that kind of stood out tonally, even though you do have this very dark sense of humour running throughout the movie. It's a hint of dark humour that's kind of coursing through the film's DNA that sort of really works beautifully along with the incredibly dark nature of its story here. But there's just this one moment within the final 20 to 30 minutes, I think it was, that kind of stood out, and it kind of led me to believe that maybe, and I could be completely wrong here, that this particular moment in the movie sort of played out originally differently. Because it did kind of stand out for me. It didn't completely throw me out. It didn't derail the film or anything like that. This is a minor gripe from me. And if you do, or if you could guess the moment that I'm talking about, maybe leave a comment below. But this is just this one particular moment that perhaps leans a little bit too heavily into the supernatural or the magical aspect of its story. And it only happens for about 10 seconds. It's literally just like 10 to 15 seconds of the movie. But it did leave me wonder, did they change that because of how maybe intense the movie does get? Because once this movie enters its third act, it spirals, and it spirals fast. And it gets very dark, it gets very intense incredibly quickly. And I fucking loved it. But I just couldn't help sort of linger on that one kind of very brief moment that I just had me thinking, was that the original intention for it to lead into sort of the final act, you could say, of this experience? I hope that made sense, because I felt like I went around the world to explain that. But yeah, there is a moment that I really want to talk about. Don't worry, I'm not going to give any details away. I think it's in the trailers, actually, and it involves our character of Bear and a Sarah Harper. Bear's and Nikki's friend and co-worker. Sarah being played by a Megan Lawless. And it's a scene where you've got our two characters that are in the car. And it's a moment that's actually really predictable. Like, you're watching a horror movie, you kind of know what's going to happen, especially with the way in which the scene is framed and how the camera's positioned. I'm just waiting for it. But the scene is still effective. No matter how predictable it is incredibly effective. I am on the edge of my seat. I know what's going to happen. But nothing can prepare you for what happens. And the reason why it's so effective is it's because of so many different reasons that I've already mentioned. The performances, the fact that you believe in these characters, that they feel real, they feel relatable. There's a tragicness there to their story that is also, very relatable. You feel for these characters emotionally. You feel like you've been on this experience with them, and it's that incredibly smart and tight writing, and just how it's all brought to life within the moment that kind of really just fuels sort of the effectiveness of such a moment, no matter how predictable it is. And like I said, I'm not going to go into any details, but it's a moment that really stood out all for the right reasons. It was that moment that made me kind of wince and just turn away. I physically had to sort of turn away from the screen. And at the same time, I was smiling with joy because I'm like, fuck yeah, I've got a horror here that is really firing on all cylinders, and that is working, and that is just evoking all the right emotions from me. And I just love how they took such a predictable moment. It's almost like they were intentionally misleading you, or misleading me. They are giving you a moment that they want to be predictable because they're like, this is going to happen. It's going to happen. And at that moment in the story, things are really escalating. But then surprise you by what happens next, by just how they bring that moment to life. How the camera would focus on a certain moment of gore or brutality. And again, I feel like the editing here has a big part to play in kind of really allowing the moments of creepiness and horror and just the sort of that unsettling and uneasy aspect of this experience to really fully come to life here. And, the direction from Curry Barker, the writing, the performances. Look, you probably guessed it about 10 minutes ago, or maybe longer, depending on how long I've rambled here. But I love this movie. Do I have very minor gripes with it? Yes, but they are very, very minor. This was one of those experiences where I just came out of it and I'm like, fuck. Wow, that really did, that felt like a ride. That really did feel like I was put through the ringer. Whatever that be, from sort of the horror perspective, just sort of the nature or what it is they are exploring thematically here, because I feel like it is quite dark and it touches on some incredibly sensitive subject matter, but it does it in a way that is incredibly clever, incredibly smart. And I haven't mentioned the score yet, which is another highlight. I adored the score by a Rock Burwell, this being his debut as a feature film composer, and wow, what a debut. The music, the score, again, is another one of those elements that does so much to add to the immersion of this experience, to bring the horror and sort of the kind of the dark nature, or the sort of what it is that they are exploring, you're thematically alive. It's a score that beautifully conveys what they are exploring you within this story, and it just adds to the immersion of the experience. And I felt the score plays such an integral part to the effectiveness of what happens in this story as the story evolves with these characters. And it's music that in places is used to sort of kind of convey the horror of what is happening within a certain moment. And sometimes in films where it's used to have that kind of add to the shock, so you'll have a loud sort of piece of music or a loud arrangement that is accompanying a certain scene to make you jump, you could say, or to sort of go, oh, what is that? But here, it does more than that. It isn't just a piece, it's not just an element to make you jump, like a cheap jump scare, for example. It's done in a way that adds this other layer to what you're witnessing within the frame unfold, and sort of does something to really get under the skin. And the music is one of those elements that does a really good job at doing that, to allow a moment, or to have a moment that kind of really sort of hits you in the gut, you could say, due to sort of the instruments and sort of what is being used within a certain an arrangement to accompany a certain moment. It's a fantastic score by Roch Burwell that I will be definitely planning on getting on physical media. And I was just very satisfied with how the story concluded. Is it going to work for everyone? I don't know. But for me personally, everything just clicked into place here. Everything just worked. And I had an incredible time with this movie. It's one of those experiences that just got me incredibly excited and just reminded me why I love film. So, you know, why I'm so passionate about movies and filmmaking and cinema. It was one of those experiences. It's not completely flawless, but the flaws that I did have are very, very minor. Because as a whole, this was an experience that just swallowed me up, and I remained immersed for the entire runtime. There are just so many aspects that I admired about it. The cinematography is another element that I haven't touched on yet, but there is so much that I admired by how this movie looked, you know, from a cinematography perspective, and just how it's brought to life through the lighting, shadows, and how certain scenes are framed. It all adds to such an incredibly immersive and settling and uneasy experience that I cannot wait to revisit. So yeah, I think I've rambled on enough about Obsession, and I cannot wait to see what else Curry Barker is going to bring us. I'm going to have to check out his directorial debut, Milk and Cereal, now, because, yeah, I just loved what he did here. So, look, enough rambling from me for now. They are my thoughts on Obsession, and I will be giving Obsession my thoughts on Obsession. But what do you guys think? Have you seen it yet? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you agree or disagree with anything I've said? Then please let me know in the comments below, and let's get a discussion going. And if you've made it this far into the video, then thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. You deserve an award to stick it out until this point in the video, because yeah, I do like to ramble on, but it's just the way I like to express my love for film, by just being me. And so yeah, and just another massive thank you to everyone that has supported the channel, whether that be liking, subscribing, commenting. It means the world to me, and I say this all the time, but it will always overwhelm me that so many of you do want to follow just some rambling Welsh geek ramble on about film and TV for about 20 minutes or however long it takes me to just express my love or dissatisfaction for something. So yeah, that's enough rambling from me for now, guys. Thank you all for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll be catching you guys soon.